make it through the storm, it don't matter the weather. Baby, can't you see a future planned with me? 'Cause I do see one with you. So I'ma write this song for you. I'm gonna write you a song that you could sing along for the rest of our days together. Would you anyway, anyway, anyway? Would you anyway, way? See, I love you 'cause I want to, I'm not forced to. I'ma treat you like a real man is supposed to do. Eventually, I get down on one knee and ask you if you wanna spend your life with me.
So imagine it is the year 1995 and you have been elected the mayor of Bogota in Colombia. And at this time, you know, Bogota is the most dangerous and the most chaotic, you know, kind of place in the world. You know, it's just coming out of like, you know, the drug lords and the cartels, and, you know, there's a lot of violence in the street. Corruption is, you know, the highest in the world. And you're the mayor of Bogota. So the question is, what do you do? What do you do as the mayor of Bogota in 1995? Well, maybe if you're an economist, you know, you will be like, okay, maybe let us, you know, spend more money, you know, have more police officers, you know, maybe build more roads, you know, maybe try to, you know, come up with like ways of, you know, fighting corruption that involves, you know, like getting money, getting resources, etc. You know, because that is, you know, the economics training. Maybe, you know, if you are coming from an education background, you may be like, let us train people, let us like maybe change the education system to try and train people to not be violent or to not be corrupt, etc. But for years, you know, for 1 year, for 2 years, for 5 years, for 10 years, the city of Bogota had so many different mayors who were trying all of these different things. But none of this was working. You know, Bogota was still the most, you know, violent city in the world. It was still the most corrupt city in the world. Until in 1995, one of those mayors asked the question, what will an artist do? What will an artist do if an artist was elected to be the mayor of Bogota? And that is the question that we are going to spend, you know, kind of this morning together thinking about. In the face of all of these societal challenges that we have, in the face of everything, you know, that is happening around us in the world, what will an artist do? And I'm just really, you know, excited for us to, you know, have these conversations and to try and think together about, you know, kind of what an artist will do, not just like in the context of Bogota and Colombia, but in the context of our everyday lives, in the context of the challenges that we face, you know, as a society, from mental health to, you know, civic engagement to corruption, politics, etc. And so that is, you know, the theme that, you know, brings us together today. Doris will, you know, give us a very, you know, quick talk. I think this is a topic she thinks a lot about and cares deeply about. And I don't know how many of you here are Harry Potter fans, but if you're a Harry Potter fan, you'll get the reference to fantastic interventions and where to find them. So we will be talking about, you know, some of these interventions that have been, you know, inspired by artistic thinking, especially, you know, Pretext, you know, which is one of the programs that, you know, we are running, you know, at Shamiri, and are hoping to, you know, like collaborate with all of you and expanding its reach and amplifying the impact of the work that, you know, that we are doing. And we will realize that most of this work that we're doing is really, you know, inspired, especially from Pretext, is really inspired by a lot of like culture and tradition, you know, from Latin America. And one of the great things, at least from my perspective, about this, you know, movement is that it's a south to south movement. You know, normally you have like either the North innovating and then exporting to the South. But here, you have Latin America and Africa, kind of at the forefront of, thinking about and designing these interventions and collaborating and exporting this work to the rest of the world. And, so we're doing Pretexia in Kenya, but it's also being done in like Paraguay and Mexico, etc. And so we'll just, kind of like see some of the, lessons and insights that we can get from there. Art, what is art? And most often when you think about art and you ask people what art is, what comes to mind may be a painting, or a photograph, or a sculpture, or music, an object. For most people, that's what comes to mind. And that is how I thought about art until my second year in university, where I signed up for a class that was titled Contemporary Developing Countries, Entrepreneurial Solutions to Intractable Social and Economic Problems. So I was attracted to this class because I have always, kind of thought and considered myself an entrepreneur. And I am from Kenya, which is a developing country. And we have a lot of social and economic problems that, seemed, kind of interesting for me, to think about. And so I walked to the class. It was taught by, I think, about 5 professors. And the first professor, who was like the main professor, was a business school professor from Harvard Business School. So that made sense, a class on entrepreneurship should be taught by, a professor from the business school. But then when we got into the class was divided into 3 modules. And so the first module was thinking like a scientist. And that made sense. If you're thinking about, social and economic problems, maybe you need to think like a scientist. The scientific approach gives us, tools and methods, to go out into the world and experiment and investigate and quote unquote come to, objective answers and objective solutions. And the second module was called Thinking Like a Planner, which also made sense, if you're trying to solve social problems, economic problems, you need to have a plan. You need to, have a strategy. So thinking like a planner makes sense. But then there was this third module called Thinking Like an Artist that when I walked into the class just felt out of place. How will thinking like an artist help us solve intractable social and economic problems in the world? And so I was very skeptical, but I signed up for the class and we just went through the motions waiting for so my question was, what is the role of art in an entrepreneurship class? And so when the module came, I wrote to Doris, and I wrote her an email and I was just like, to the extent that I admire, kind of like your perspective, but I don't think art has a role to play in, solving, social and economic problems. And she was very generous. She responded to my email. She invited me to, come to her office for a conversation. I showed up to an office. She actually made me coffee, which was, which I think was indicative that we were going to have a long conversation. So we ended up having, kind of about a 60 to 70 minute conversation. And that, became the first of really many, kind of conversations. And I think, Doris, maybe now is the time for you to just come on stage and introduce yourself and maybe just tell us why you think the arts have a role to play when we think about economic and social problems.
Thank you so much.
No, yeah.
Thank you so I'm really delighted because you know what it's like to win over a skeptic rather than just a fan, right? To overcome skepticism is a real triumph. And Tom is not an easy interlocutor. He's very bright and very skeptical. But why is art important for addressing challenges? Because the name of art, the only definition of art, is making new things. That's what art is. If you make pretty things, if you find things that you know are pleasing, those are agreeable things. Those are pleasing, but they're not art. Art is always something new that surprises you and that confuses you enough to want to talk to someone about it. That's the definition of art. I'm kind of channeling in my language what Immanuel Kant wrote in his third critique on aesthetic judgment. It has to be surprising. It has to be out of the ordinary. So let me finish the story about Bogota. And I'm so happy to hear your story, David, about Bogota. I remember being in Bogota in those years, and the taxi drivers would never stop at a red light. I said, that's dangerous. They said, it's more dangerous to stop. People were getting pulled out of cars. So the Secretary of Culture said to the new mayor, you know, boss, there's nothing to be done in the city. It's time to bring out the clowns. And the new boss decided that he would not get offended, even though that was an offense. And he looked at the Secretary of Culture and said, that's a good idea. So he fired 20 traffic cops from the center of the city. They were all corrupt, so he didn't have to look for corrupt cops. You give, a few bucks to a policeman and you don't get a ticket. Everyone was corrupt. Fired 20 cops from the center of the city and hired 20 pantomime artists. So anyone who made an infraction, who crossed against the light, who didn't look at a crosswalk, who did anything that wasn't legal in a very crisp way, got made fun of. And everybody on the street laughed at them. And that stopped people, because Bogotanos don't want to be made foolish in public. So they started to look at red lights, they started to look at crosswalks. The law became a prop for playing together. That was the icebreaker. That was the icebreaker. And then artists came to the city and knocked on the mayor's door and said, I have an idea for you. And the mayor brought the idea to his cabinet and said, should we try this one? Should we try that one? Because there's always a risk in art. Since it's a surprise, you don't know if it will work or not. And if it doesn't work, you try something else because you are creative. And I'm circling back to come to the entrepreneur class. What entrepreneur doesn't know that 9 out of 10 of his or her initiatives will fail? You know they will fail, but you try many so that a few of them will work. And that happens with social entrepreneurship and with economic entrepreneurship. Our colleague Tarun Khanna, who invited me to do this module, is an entrepreneur in both those senses. So taking a risk because you are confident in your possibility to try something out and to have the judgment to know if it worked or it didn't work. Okay? That's what art does in entrepreneurship. And without art, this is something that Jacob Balaba and I were starting to talk about, because Jacob is dedicated to some of the same work that Tom is doing about youth development and saving youth from depression that can lead to suicide in Uganda. We were talking about it, and I said, it's really very sad that kids don't like to go to school, because the word school, and I learned this very recently, the word school in ancient Greek, which gave us the word in all the European languages, school, escuela, Scuola, Schule, comes from the Greek schole. You know what schole means? Leisure. Leisure and the activities that you do in leisure. Because the people who went to school in ancient Greek were privileged young men. They didn't have to work for a living. So what did they do for fun? They did poetry, philosophy, music, sports. If it wasn't fun, it wasn't school. And if we can bring that spirit to a democratic system where we all go to school, men and women, young and old, rich and poor, then we have a future together. Without pleasure, people stop doing things. If it's pleasurable, they stay at it. They make it better. They teach each other. So that's what art is good for. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you very much.
We'll get a chance to go through this in more details today. So what did I learn from Doris? So I'm getting, this is now when she knows that I actually was sleeping in class, I was paying, attention. So what does it mean to think, like an artist? And building, on what Doris, said, an artist is someone who is predisposed to the idea that there are many, interpretations of a situation. So when you see, for example, a painting or a photo or a building, if you're seeing it from the perspective of an artist, you are aware that there can be and there are multiple interpretations to this situation that you're exposed to. Another term, that I also learned from Doris was this idea of cultural agents. And it's the idea that when we are thinking like artists, we are all part, of a society and of a people, that, has culture and, has this whole, 360-degree life around us that is going on. And we can use this culture around us, this society around us, as a sort of raw material and a source of inspiration to create and think about ways that we can solve, economic and social problems in our context. And that, brings us now to the case of Antonis Mocus, who was the mayor of Bogota. So they've tried everything else, they've tried increasing police officers, they've tried literally everything that they could. And as a joke, and it starts as a joke, when they tell the mayor, okay, you've tried everything, just bring out the clowns. And he actually decides to bring out the clowns. But in so doing, he doesn't realize the moment, he eventually realizes that he's really tapping into this, phenomenon of being a cultural agent, right? So, like Doris was saying, the people of Bogota don't like it when people are, making fun of them in public. They're embarrassed people make fun of them in public. So if you have clowns who are making fun of people when they break rules, they're embarrassed that they're being made fun of, so they stop, doing that. And if you actually really study the case study of Bogota, once they actually did this very simple thing of just having clowns on the street, the crime rates dropped, people were paying more taxes than they actually were in the past. And that actually became the catalyst for getting Bogota out, from being, the most unsafe and most corrupt place in the world to now, one of the, leading, tourist and economic, destinations. Another example is he's now the Prime Minister of Albania, but when he was the mayor of Tirana, kind of the way he tapped, into culture was just having people paint their buildings. If you go to Tirana, it's one of the just our most colorful cities, and we'll go into more details, about this later. And so what we're trying to do is we find ourselves in this context where, from mental health to education to economic challenges, etc., we are all trying to think about solutions. We are all trying to develop interventions. We are all trying to do something. But very rarely do we pause and ask ourselves, what will an artist do? When we go into these conversations, for example, about education reform, we'll be like, what will an economist do? What will the social scientist do? But rarely do we ask ourselves, what would an artist do? And so when we think about problems in the world, we're thinking about them from a hierarchical perspective. And in this hierarchy of needs, things like pleasure and aesthetics and leisure are afterthoughts than things which are not important. We want food, shelter, water. Those are the most important things. But if we really think, the things that you do best, the things that you enjoy most, are the things that you find pleasurable, And that, is also the idea behind what Doris was saying, where now, for example, people don't like reading. Students don't like going to school. Parents have to force kids to, you basically have to have a cane, for someone to do things in school. And it's because they're not enjoying, there's no pleasure, there is no leisure within that, because we're thinking about school from this very hierarchical perspective. And so just school is about our work, when we're doing work, we're thinking about it from this perspective, I have to get food, shelter, and water.
So we are getting very close. And even so, we still need art so that patients can express what is this that they are feeling. There are things that you cannot express in words, but you can only express them in the form of drawing. I do remember very well that some of the things that were expressed to me in a way that it was difficult to understand was somebody sending you a flower. We had it here. The young man who was sang for us. Things that cannot be expressed in writing, but can only be expressed through art. One of them is music. And the people who have made a lot of difference in terms of making changes in the world, the way they think, Bob Marley, Bonnie, and a few other artists in America who expressed issues to do with the segregation, issues to do with the poverty, issues to do with human life, actually were artists. And they were able to do it and express it so well. And this is why, in many ways, without knowing, I loved art.
To conceptualize it, we didn't make a Venn diagram. These are not areas that overlap and get together in one spot. These are 3 gears that drive one another. So if you come in, when you see this on your own computer, it's just pre-texts.org. Literacy, thank you. Literacy is the way we come in when we're teaching. But let's say we're artists, we come in through innovation, or we're technologists, we come in through innovation. Or we do violence prevention, or restorative justice, the way we're working in Colombia now. You can come in through any of these gears, but to do literacy, every literature teacher knows that there's nothing clear in writing, right? We're always interpreting, so we're always being creative just to read. Try yourself. When you read the same text a week later, tell me if the text hasn't changed. We're always interpreting. There's no transfer of knowledge. There's always interpretation. So you come in from literacy and you're already making art. Well, let's make drawing, let's make dance, let's make costumes. And because we're all making art, we're all different, and we can avoid some of the competition in a classroom because we enjoy each other's difference. We admire each other's difference. We admire our fellow students because they're different. So it becomes a violence prevention mechanism. It doesn't matter, as I say, where we come in. And this is a holistic idea of education. It's not a siloed idea. In the United States, and I think worldwide, people are so concerned with socio-emotional education that they're leaving aside the cognitive part as if it's crippling children's pleasure. And if you leave aside the cognitive part, kids get worried that they're not learning because their parents are pressuring them to learn. So we want to avoid depression, and we end up deepening it. That's why we propose this gear system. Here we are in 2022, coming out of a plague. The Italian Renaissance started in the 1400s when Italy came out of a plague. An architect with a businessman, with a politician, made the Renaissance flower. We need to do that again. We need to follow the spirit of products where technology, education, literacy, arts, pleasure drive the world again.
The song I'm gonna do is kind of related to everything that's been talked about here, especially in line to mental health. The song is called Safe Space, and the idea of the song came about at this time where my mental health was kind of in the pits, and I needed someone to talk to because I wasn't comfortable with talking to myself, because I felt like I was the source of all my problems, or so I thought. I just needed someone to talk to. I needed someone to be my safe space. So I hope you guys enjoy.
I'm a little broken, I'm a little flawed. I'm not out in the open, no. Being me has been so hard, emotionally tortured. I'm stitching up this broken heart. I'm mentally exhausted, yeah. I don't know how I got this far, and it's getting to me, and I'm trying to make it leave. Fikra zangu zimenikwamia. Would you help me believe that it's not bigger than me? Shida zangu je utazisikia. Mware menyera. Even through my darkest days, tell me it'll be okay now. Watenjara, be the one to heal my pain, be the place that I can name my safe space. I'm trying not to fall off the edge. I'm trying not to hear what they say. I'm trying so hard to be the man they've structured me to be, but I don't think that's me, no. And it's getting to me, and I'm trying to make it leave. Fikra zangu zimenikwamia. Would you help me believe that it's not bigger than me? Shida zangu je utazisikia. Mware Even through my darkest days, tell me it'll be okay now. Guatenjara, be the one to heal my pain, or be the place that I can name. Menyera, even through my darkest days, tell me it'll be okay now. Guatenjara, be the one to heal my pain, be the place that I can name my safe space. My safe space. What I'm singing in the chorus, I'm Meru, so it's Meru for Mware Menyera is Meru for girl, take care of me. And Ngwatanjara basically means hold my hand. So I'm just asking someone to be there to be able to listen and to hold my hand through it. Yeah, and that's safe space. Have a beautiful evening.